The sky above Station Helix 9 was silent now. Too silent. No patrols, no cargo routes, just debris from the last transmission, a broken beacon flickering against the backdrop of distant stars. Commander Rorland stood on the bridge of the Vindicator, staring at the wreckage as his fists clenched at his sides. The message was clear. The Akari had broken the Treaty of Arus. Again. But this time, they hadn't just violated trade routes or tampered with border beacons. They had wiped out Eidolon Outpost, a human colony built under the protection of the Galactic Accord, an outpost designated non-combat, populated with engineers, families, children. Rorland's wife had been there, so had his little boy, and they weren't coming back. There was only one law humanity ever insisted on when it joined the galactic community a century ago. Civilians are not to be touched, ever. The other species had their own rules, their own codes of war, their endless councils and peace charades. But humanity had just one law, and now it had been broken, violated, spat on. "Sir," Lieutenant Gren's voice cut through the silence. "We've confirmed it. No survivors. We picked up partial biosigns, then nothing. Akari plasma cannons erased the whole settlement." Rorland didn't move. He didn't blink. His voice came out low, almost too calm. "Prep all fleet commanders for Black Protocol. I want full strike formations armed and in warp range by 0000. Gren hesitated. "That'll mean a direct declaration of war." "It's not war," Rorland cut him off. "It's justice." The word hung heavy in the command deck. No one spoke. They all knew what Black Protocol meant. Total engagement. No prisoners, no politics, no surrender. Back in the early days, humans were underestimated. Soft-skinned, overly emotional, slow to adapt. That was before the Scour War, before the Battle of Erin's Forge, before the entire galaxy watched a handful of Terran soldiers hold back 6 alien fleets for 18 days with nothing but kinetic rifles, rage, and duct tape. Humanity had been peaceful since. Obedient. Patient. Some called them tamed. But they forgot what humans were capable of when family was touched. As the fleet prepared, Rorland walked through the barracks, where pilots were already suiting up. The air crackled with fury. These weren't conscripts. These were veterans, men and women who had watched comrades die in forgotten systems no one wrote about. Soldiers who had earned peace. One of them stopped Rorland. "Commander," she said, her voice rough. "They killed my sister. Her kids were still in the cry nursery when the bombs hit." He looked at her, and she didn't need to say anything more. He just nodded. Across the corridor, technicians were loading newly developed weapons, things outlawed by galactic ordinance. Humanity had agreed not to use neurophage shells, gravity hammers, and biowire tech. That agreement ended the moment the Akari made civilian blood run across Martian soil. Within hours, 12 Terran dreadnoughts moved into position along the Zarvan line, right on the edge of Akari-controlled space. The galaxy watched in nervous silence. Other species sent messengers, warnings, pleas for restraint. Rorland didn't answer any of them. He sat alone in his command chamber, staring at a screen showing the last moments of Eidolon. Grainy footage. Children playing in artificial sunlight. An alert. Screaming. The sky lighting up. And then, nothing. He replayed it again. And again. And again. By the time the order was given, he didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Just pressed his thumb to the biometric pad. "Begin Operation Remnant," he said coldly. "Leave nothing breathing behind." The stars shuddered as Terran ships dropped from warp like falling blades. No more diplomacy. No more patience. They had broken the only law. Now they would drown in the blood that came with it. The Vindicator emerged from hyperspace like a shadow at war, the silence of its arrival drowned only by the swelling fleet behind it. Dreadnoughts, destroyers, battle cruisers, ships built not just for defense, but for what humans once called scorched earth. Orbiting the edge of the Ravan expanse, they stared into the black nothing where the Akari hive worlds lay coiled and silent. To outsiders, it may have seemed disproportionate, the response too brutal, too final, but to anyone who had ever fought with Terrans, who knew their history, who remembered Earth before the stars, this was mercy compared to what humanity was truly capable of. On the command bridge, Rorland stood as the operations deck came to life. Every screen lit with target data, threat assessments, Akari orbital positions. His jaw clenched as he reviewed the telemetry. "Status?" he barked. "Fleet-wide comms are up," Gren replied. "Orbital defenses detected around Corinth Major. Confirmed military installations. No signs of civilian biosigns." Rorland's eyes narrowed. They cleared them out preemptively. Gren's face went pale. "They knew we were coming." "They always knew," Rorland said, his voice like steel. "They thought we wouldn't have the stomach." Humanity had fought wars for survival, wars for territory, wars for pride. But this was different. This was a response carved from vengeance and cold logic. An eye for an eye, multiplied by the weight of every lost soul on Eidolon. Rorland turned to the fleet's primary AI. "Execute planetary assault protocol. Target Corinth's atmospheric shield generators. No ground forces until orbital supremacy is absolute." "Confirmed," the AI responded in a female monotone. Within minutes, the heavens themselves cracked open. Terran capital ships fired coordinated barrages that lit up the vacuum of space with rivers of energy. Akari orbital turrets spun up in defense, returning violet pulses of alien plasma, but the shield grids faltered. Human tech wasn't pretty. It didn't dance or shimmer or shine. It hit like a sledgehammer and didn't stop until something broke. And something did. Corinth's outer atmosphere ignited as the Terran bombardment found its mark. Chain explosions ripped through the defensive rings, snapping them like bones. The Akari fleet scrambled, disorganized, their sleek black vessels arcing erratically like insects under fire. "Push through their center line," Rorland ordered. "Target power cores, not hulls. Make it hurt." As the Vindicator plunged into the fray, a blast rocked the side of the ship. Gren stumbled, catching a handrail. "Direct hit. They've switched to heat sink bypass weapons." "Then we close the distance," Rorland growled. "Initiate knife-range combat." Knife range. No missiles. No long-range cannon fire. Just guns, claws, and steel. The Vindicator roared forward, dragging 2 battlecruisers with it. Smaller Akari ships darted toward them, fast, agile, but paper-thin when struck. Human autocannons shredded through the first wave. The second got closer, ramming into hull plating with suicidal frenzy. "They're sacrificing themselves," Gren muttered, watching one Akari ship implode with its pilot still inside. "They should have thought of sacrifice before targeting children," Rorland spat. Suddenly, the rear alarms screamed. An Akari dreadnought decloaked, twice the size of the Vindicator, bristling with heat lances and biological weaponry. It opened fire instantly, vomiting a torrent of acidic green blasts that lanced through the rear Terran flank. "Brace for impact!" a crewman shouted. One Terran destroyer vanished in a single hit, its hull breached and vaporized. "Redirect all forward shields to rear," Rorland ordered. "Prepare wormhook maneuver." The Vindicator spun sharply, slingshotting around the dying gravity well of a nearby moonlet. It came up under the dreadnought, angling its plasma harpoons and kinetic anchors toward the underbelly. "Fire all breach piercers!" 3 cables launched into the dreadnought, dragging the Terran ship forward like a beast sinking its claws into prey. The impact shook the deck. Rorland didn't wait. "Boarding teams, go now!" At once, the assault bays ejected their dropships, carrying exo-armored Marines straight into the enemy's throat. Inside the enemy dreadnought, chaos reigned. The Akari weren't soldiers in the human sense. They were hive-bred, programmed to obey. They reacted to threats, but they didn't adapt well when the threat screamed while shooting them in the face. Sergeant Dane was first through the breach. His boots hit the deck with a sickening crunch. Akari blood soaked the floor already. His pulse rifle barked, downing 3 of the insectoid bastards before they even raised their limbs. "Push up!" he roared. "We take the core room and gut this thing!" The Marines surged forward, ruthless, silent, a wall of trained death. For every 2 they lost, 15 Akari fell. Not because the humans were stronger, but because they were angrier. Rorland watched from the bridge as telemetry from the boarding teams fed live updates. "Commander, boarding party has reached the control hub. They're encountering a new caste. Larger, armored, maybe a command variant." Rorland narrowed his eyes. "Tell them to kill it slowly." Back inside the Akari dreadnought, Dane stood over the writhing form of the command beast. 9 feet tall, pulsing with internal glands that hissed as it bled. It clicked at him in some ancient dialect, half code, half pheromone. Dane didn't understand it. He just knelt beside it, aimed his sidearm at its face, and whispered, "You murdered my daughter." Then pulled the trigger. The dreadnought's reactor was ruptured 5 minutes later. As the boarding parties evacuated, it exploded in a sunburst of green fire, tearing a hole in the Akari battle line. The Terran fleet didn't let up. 2 more Akari colonies were located, hidden beneath asteroid fields. One was evacuated before arrival. The other wasn't. Terran Marines landed, and the cleansing was done room by room, hive by hive. No negotiations, no prisoners, just retribution. And yet, as the bodies piled up and the Akari war machine cracked under the Terran advance, something deeper stirred. In the darkness beyond known space, beyond Akari records, a signal pulsed. It was old, it was alien, but it was watching. Back aboard the Vindicator, Rorland sat in silence in his quarters, eyes fixed on an old image. His wife, smiling. His son, holding a stuffed dragon, eyes wide with curiosity. They were gone. Burned alive under Akari plasma because some nest lord thought it would send a message. Thought humanity would fold. They didn't understand. Rorland hadn't even started yet. Gren entered quietly, saluting. "Commander, we've received intercepted transmissions. Other species are urging a ceasefire. They're calling the response excessive." Rorland looked up slowly. "They think this is excessive?" Gren hesitated. "They say we've already killed 30,000 Akari across 5 systems." Rorland stood. "They murdered our children. They broke the one law, and they think they can measure justice in numbers?" Gren didn't reply. No one could. There was no metric, no diplomacy left. There was only the path forward. The next phase was already mapped out. Operation Bastion Collapse. Target, Hive Singularity Prime, the Akari's sacred core world. Not a war hub. A religious one. Ancient, protected, untouched by war for 1,000 years. But war was coming. Rorland made sure the fleet understood. No destruction of culture centers, no orbital bombardment of temples, no blasphemy. He wanted every Akari leader brought out alive, then executed. Publicly. Let the galaxy see what happens when humans are pushed past the edge. And yet, something bothered him. In the silence of space, humanity had always expected to be the underdog, the weaker species, the desperate survivors. But now, With Akari blood on every deck and victory on every screen, a question settled in his mind like a quiet cancer. What do we become, when vengeance is all that's left? He didn't voice it. Not yet. Not while there were still hives to burn. The fleet hung in the void like a swarm of judgment. 2 weeks had passed since the fall of Corinth Major, and yet the stars had not grown quiet again. They trembled with energy, raw and unresolved. The human war machine pressed deeper into Akari space, system by system, choking the Empire at its throat. But the final blow remained. Hive Singularity Prime, the unspoken capital. A world never touched, never conquered, never even scanned by foreign eyes. That was about to change. Commander Rorland stood alone in the observation chamber, watching the spiral of stars arc behind the translucent shield. It was peaceful, almost beautiful, and utterly undeserved. Peace had become an illusion, the kind they sold to widows and orphaned sons when the coffins came home sealed. He had believed in peace once, back when he was just an officer with a family and a future. But now, peace was something he had to burn out of others before he could ever feel it again. Behind him, the doors slid open. Gren entered, carrying a data slab. "They've sent another envoy," he said, voice low. "Let me guess," Rorland replied. "Another half-blood diplomat with a robe and a regret?" Gren nodded. "This one from the Sendari Council. They say the galaxy will not stand idly by if we proceed with the assault on Hive Singularity." Rorland turned, voice steady but sharp. "Did they stand idly by when Eidolon burned?" Gren said nothing. "Did they lift a finger when families screamed over open comms? Did they dispatch peacekeepers when our children were melted alive in cryo-nurseries?" Still nothing. "They watched. They all watched. And now they want us to stop because they're uncomfortable with the cost." Gren held the slab tighter. "It's more than politics now. Intel suggests the Akari have begun transmitting distress signals to something old, deep, beyond mapped space." Rorland's gaze hardened. "Let them." The map flickered on the holotable. Hive Singularity Prime. A world of endless towers and shadowed spires, coiled in magnetic storms and veiled by radiation clouds. A planet that had never been truly seen, only feared. Terran intelligence had very little to go on, but what they knew was enough. Hive Singularity was not just a throne world, it was sacred to the Akari. It held the Queen Spire, the breeding and command source of every generation. Destroying it wouldn't just end a war, it would end their civilization. It would be genocide. And yet, no one flinched. No one questioned it, not out loud. That was the terrifying part. They wanted this. Not just Rorland, not just the fleet. Humanity. The vids back home showed it all. Eidolon's last broadcasts, civilian interviews, charred remains of homes with children's toys still lying untouched in the ash. The people were angry, united in a way that governments could never orchestrate. Humanity wasn't debating morality anymore. They were loading the gun and asking where to aim. Rorland walked to the intercom panel and opened a fleet-wide broadcast channel. "Commanders, officers, soldiers." His voice was iron, slow, carved from stone. "You know what lies ahead. A world untouched by war, sacred to them, feared by all. But they broke our one law, and in doing so they invited judgment." He paused, letting the silence drive deeper. "This is not vengeance, it's correction. And when we are done, they will not remember us as invaders. They will remember us as the consequence of their arrogance." He cut the channel. Across the fleet, thousands of eyes stared forward, men and women in armor, pilots with trembling fingers wrapped around joystick triggers, engineers tightening the last bolts on weapons humanity had promised never to use again. And deep within the Vindicator, In a cold, unlit chamber, something else awoke. It was a weapon never officially named, developed in secrecy, stored in silence, known only by its Terran codename, Silencer Protocol. A virus, not biological, not digital, psychological, an algorithm-based neurofeedback system designed to hijack the collective psychic link of species like the Akari, hive-minded, interconnected, interempathic. Once deployed, it didn't kill the body, it killed will. It injected feedback loops of grief, fear, and trauma into the hive link until mass suicide became preferable. It was banned after the Vega trials. Now it was being uploaded into the drop pods. Rorland knew it. He signed off on it himself. And yet, as he sat in the war chamber, reviewing deployment strategies, something unsettled him. Not guilt. He'd moved beyond that. It was the silence, the absence of doubt from his men, from himself, from all of it. The fact that genocide had stopped feeling like a question and started feeling like an answer. The Vindicator broke warp over Hive Singularity Prime with the fury of a god returning to a world that had forgotten fear. The planet hung below them, vast and unnerving, like something that was never meant to be seen by human eyes. The clouds above its atmosphere moved in spirals that seemed to pulse with soundless rhythm, almost like breathing. Towers taller than mountains pierced through the storms, pulsing with bioluminescent signals that humans couldn't decipher. But they didn't come to understand. They came to erase. Rorland stood on the forward deck as drop pods launched from a dozen ships at once, thousands of them, each carrying shock troops, war drones, or payloads designed for surgical devastation. The Akari responded late. Their orbital weapons flared, too weak, too slow. Their ground-to-air defenses activated, too fragile, too centralized. The first wave punched through. Terran Marines landed like a hammer dropped from orbit. Exosuits thundered across alien terrain. Combat drones cleared out tunnel systems with flame and gravity mines. The sky turned orange from burning towers. The air filled with the stench of rotting shell and ionized blood. Inside the Queen Spire, the last Akari queens began the death chant, a ritual meant to summon ancestral aid from beyond the stars. Rorland watched the footage live from drone cams. They were humming, clicking in unison, bleeding from their sensory glands. Something about it disturbed him. He didn't know why. It felt too ritualistic, too coordinated, too ancient. Then the signal changed. Not a distress call, not a scream, a summoning. Back on the Vindicator, alarms blared. "Commander!" Gren shouted. "We're picking up an anomalous signature outside the system." "What kind of anomaly?" Gren didn't answer right away. Then finally he said, "It's not from this galaxy." Rorland stared at him. "Say that again." Gren turned the screen. It showed a rift forming. No known technology, no drive trails, just space itself tearing, folding into a wound, and something crawling out. Something massive. At first glance, it looked like a ship, but it had spines, arms, a core that pulsed like a living heart. The crew went silent. It wasn't Akari. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything they had files on. It was responding to the Queen's signal, and it was coming here. Fast. Rorland issued the call. "All forces, fall back to orbital defense formation. I want all weapons primed. If it breathes, we kill it." Gren looked pale. "Commander, what if this wasn't just a war of retaliation? What if the Akari were keeping something in check all this time?" Rorland's voice didn't waver. "Then we'll kill that too." But deep down, in the part of him that hadn't burned out yet, he felt something he hadn't in months. Not vengeance, not hate, not purpose, fear. The rift widened, not with fire, not with sound, with absence. Space didn't explode, It peeled back like skin, the stars bent around the gaping wound, gravity snarling and spitting in ways the human mind could barely comprehend. All sensors on the Vindicator shorted out for 3 full seconds when the object slipped through. They never got those seconds back. Rorland gripped the command rail tightly as the tactical display fuzzed and rebooted, flooding the screen with a size-to-scale estimation of the unknown. It wasn't a ship, not in the way humans built things. It was organic, towering. Laced with bone and metal grown into one, it moved like something alive, but not awake. The crew stared in silence. "Put it on screen," Rorland ordered. The view shifted, magnified, and stabilized. What they saw didn't make sense. At its core, the thing had a torso, rib-like cages spread around a central pulse. Wings of filament and cosmic dust unfurled from its sides, each as long as a Terran moon station. Its surface shifted with eyes. Not lenses, eyes, that opened and closed, blinking with thoughts no species had words for. "Life signs?" Rorland asked. "No classification possible," Gren answered, barely whispering. "Commander, this thing has neural activity on multiple temporal layers. It's thinking in past, present, and future all at once." Rorland didn't blink. "What do the Akari call it?" Gren swallowed. "In intercepted religious texts, it's referred to as the buried star, a world eater, a god they swore never to awaken. They summoned it. They were desperate." Rorland stared out at the impossible mass floating just beyond the pull of Hive Singularity Prime. His first thought was tactical. Could it be killed? His second was colder. What if it couldn't? The comms crackled. "This is Admiral Tannick of the Gladius. Enemy contact confirmed. We are tracking movement. The object is powering up. No visible weapon systems, but it's drawing energy from surrounding vacuum. Commander, request immediate fire authorization." Rorland looked down at his screen. Half the fleet was already forming into attack wings, waiting for a single command. "Fire at will," he said, and the sky went to war. 12 Terran dreadnoughts unleashed a barrage the size of a small moon. Railguns thundered. Particle beams lit the void like jagged lightning. Nuclear-tipped lances spiraled into the beast's core. But the thing did not dodge. It did not move. It simply absorbed. The first wave of attacks vanished into its hull, swallowed like raindrops into ocean water. Shockwaves of displaced gravity lashed back at the human ships. Smaller vessels spun wildly, engines flickering. One exploded before it even realized it had been hit. "What the hell was that?" Rorland snapped. "Backlash," Gren muttered, eyes locked on data feeds. "Our own kinetic energy is being reflected, like it's using the laws of motion against us. Redirect to antimatter warheads. Load anti-mimetic cores. Throw everything we have." But even as the orders left his mouth, the creature moved. Not forward, not back. Inside. The mass split open, twin segments folding away to reveal a pulsing wound of color. It wasn't a weapon, at least not in the traditional sense. It was a message, a projection. It struck every human mind on every ship simultaneously. Not a voice, not an image, just a feeling. Regret. Rorland clutched his head. It was like someone poured boiling memories into his skull. The faces of his wife and son, distorted, alive, screaming, but they never screamed like that. He knew that, he remembered, and still, he saw it, heard it, felt it, not in memory, in present tense. It was showing him grief amplified. It wanted him to suffer. It wanted all of them to. Around the fleet, panic erupted. One pilot gunned his own reactor. A gunner screamed until his throat collapsed. Several crew members fell into catatonia, locked inside personal nightmares that weren't their own. "This is psychological warfare!" Gren shouted. "It's broadcasting trauma across open minds!" "How?" Rorland barked. Commander, it's hijacked the silencer protocol. It's feeding off what we made. They had built a weapon to destroy hive minds through emotion, and now a greater hive had twisted it into something else. It was feeding on pain. Rorland stood tall, even as blood trickled from one nostril. Shut down silencer uploads. Cut the psychic link. Go analog. I don't care if we use flags and smoke signals. Break the network. Gren scrambled to comply. In moments, the Terran ships isolated themselves. AI cores went dark. Neural uplinks disconnected. It was crude, risky, but it worked. The screaming stopped. But so did coordination. Without the link, fleet strategy collapsed into chaos, and the buried star moved again. It unfurled its filament wings and descended toward Hive Singularity Prime. Not in rage, not in vengeance, in judgment. It was not there to protect the Akari. It was there to cleanse them. No, Rorland breathed. It's not with them. It's against them. From the surface, the Akari were trying to flee. Spires collapsed. Organic shuttles burst from the ground like wasps. They scrambled toward orbit. The buried star opened one eye, just one. The ships stopped mid-flight, froze, then exploded. All of them, shattered in synchronized waves of light. The buried star didn't spare any of its worshippers. It wasn't a god. It was punishment made manifest. Rorland turned toward Gren. What if we weren't the only species they've done this to? Gren looked pale. Sir, what if this isn't the first time the Akari wiped out a peaceful world? What if this thing is what wakes up when that happens? Gren didn't answer. He couldn't. Down below, Hive Singularity cracked. The planet was being unmade. Spire by spire, tectonic plate by plate, the buried star peeled it back with gravity pulses, pulling centuries of Akari legacy into its waiting core. It was reaping them, punishing them for breaking a law even older than the Terran one. A law of balance, of boundaries. Do not touch the innocent. Rorland sat down. For the first time in this entire war, he didn't know what to do next. They had come for justice, and now justice had come for everyone. The fleet held its fire. There was no point. The buried star didn't look at them again, didn't attack. It simply ignored humanity as it consumed its old enemies. 1 million Akari screamed as their world was erased. No more hives, no more queens, no more Akari. It took exactly 23 minutes, and then the rift began to form again. The buried star folded its wings, tucked its pain away, and drifted back into the tear it came from, like a memory vanishing into sleep. And the stars were silent again. Hours passed. Rorland sat alone in the war room. No victory music played, no cheers, no parades. Hive Singularity was gone. The Akari Empire had ceased to exist. But something deeper had been unearthed. Not just the buried star, not just ancient vengeance. A question. What had humanity just invited into the galaxy? Gren stood in the doorway. We should go home, he said. Rorland nodded. But he didn't move. The silence after genocide is not peaceful. It's suffocating. Weeks passed. The Terran fleet hung at the edge of a dead system where Hive Singularity Prime used to be. Now it was nothing. Just a drifting cloud of particles and radiation, the grave of an entire species. No celebration, no headlines, no victory speeches, because nobody knew what to call it. It hadn't been war, not at the end. It had been something else, something so large, so ancient, that trying to name it felt like a child giving a label to an earthquake. Rorland hadn't spoken in 6 days. Not to Gren, not to the admirals, not even to the Terran High Council back on Earth, who demanded a debriefing. He ignored their transmissions, letting them pile up in his queue like junk mail from a dead empire. He spent his time staring out the viewport, watching the remains of the Akari world twist into spirals of ash. He had wanted justice, vengeance, retribution, blood for blood, and he got it. But something else had gotten it too. Something beyond human control. And that's what haunted him. Gren eventually broke the silence. "Sir," he said, entering the captain's chambers, "the council has repeated their demand. They want a return. They want answers." Rorland turned slowly. His eyes were darker than before, not from lack of sleep, from clarity, a kind of understanding that changed people. "Do you think we're done?" he asked quietly. Gren frowned. "The war is over." "No," Rorland said. "The war is different. We didn't end it. We passed the baton to something older, something that was waiting." Gren sat, unsure of his own thoughts. "You think the buried star was watching the whole time?" "I think it was watching for a reason to awaken, and the Ikari gave it one." Gren swallowed. "And what did we give it?" Rorland didn't answer, because he didn't know. He played the moment over in his head, the instant it looked into him, not with hate, not even with judgment, but with understanding, as if it saw not just what he had done, but why, and approved. That terrified him more than anything. Outside the Vindicator, the fleet had mostly gone silent. Ships drifted on minimal power. Soldiers stopped training. Some started drinking. Others never took off their armor again. A few turned off their comms and just stared into space, haunted by images the buried star had forced into their minds. One Marine had taken his helmet off and walked into the airlock, smiling. Another spent 30 hours sketching the creature's eyes in charcoal on the walls of his quarters, then clawed them out with his bare hands. Humanity had won. But it had witnessed something it wasn't meant to see. Something no mind should bear. Earth didn't understand. The council back home, all cloaked in ceremony and protocol, demanded explanations, data, war trophies, a clear victory narrative. But they didn't get it. Because they hadn't been there when the stars blinked, and something older than time woke up to remind everyone that law didn't start with treaties. It started with survival. In one of their final calls, the Terran Chancellor appeared on Holo. "Commander Rorland, we need a public statement. The people are uneasy. They know the Ikari are gone, but they don't understand why you haven't returned." Rorland said nothing. "They think you're hiding something," the Chancellor added, voice hardening. "They think this silence means there's more to the story." There was more, but not something that fit into press releases. "Commander," the Chancellor pressed, "we must spin this. The buried star? Whatever it was, it helped us. The Ikari paid the price. Humanity is secure again. Use it." Rorland stared into the Holo. "You want me to turn a god of extinction into a headline?" The Chancellor leaned forward. "We want people to feel safe. That's what matters now." Safe. It was laughable. No one was safe. Not anymore. Because safety was a lie they told themselves between wars. And now, after seeing what waited beyond the curtain of stars, that lie was wearing thin. After the transmission ended, Rorland walked into the lower decks, into the hangars where the soldiers used to cheer. Now the lights were dim. Men sat in silence, armor half off, eyes hollow, not afraid, not broken, just numb. He passed a tech officer curled in a corner, whispering over and over again. "It blinked. It saw me. It blinked. It saw me." He passed a medic praying to a god he hadn't believed in since childhood, repeating ancient words with bloody knuckles and cracked lips. He passed Dane, the sergeant who had personally executed the Ikari Queen during the dreadnought raid, staring at a photo of his daughter, the one who had died, on Eidolon. "I thought this would help," Dane whispered as Rorland passed. "I thought killing them would make it better." Rorland stopped. "Did it?" Dane looked up. No, it made me worse. That night, Rorland stood in the cryo garden, a quiet chamber of simulated wind and trees where soldiers went to remember Earth. It was synthetic, holographic grass, air scrubbers mimicking a spring breeze, fake stars painted onto the ceiling. And yet, it was the closest thing they had to peace. Gren found him there. I've been thinking, he said. We should go home. Let the dust settle. Let Earth decide what comes next. Rorland didn't look at him. That's not our job anymore. Then what is? Rorland turned. His face wasn't angry, just tired. I think we've stepped into something bigger. The Akari weren't just murderers. They were gatekeepers. They kept the galaxy blind to what sleeps in the dark. Gren shook his head. So what, we become its heralds? No, Rorland said. We make sure no one ever gives it a reason to wake again. Gren stared. You want to hide it. I want to bury it again. The idea hit like a bullet to the chest. For the first time in modern history, humanity had encountered something beyond politics, beyond war, beyond power. A universal truth carved in ancient flesh. If you break the law of innocence, you don't answer to men, you answer to something that remembers. But humanity had witnessed it now, felt it, tasted its judgment. That knowledge could spread to Earth, to allies, to enemies. All it would take was one fool chasing power, one diplomat looking for leverage, and the buried star would awaken again. This time, maybe not as humanity's silent ally, maybe as its executioner. Rorland issued the order the next morning. All records of the buried star are to be wiped, all crew logs sealed. This operation is officially listed as an Akari civil war. No mention of outside entities, no mention of rifts. Gren didn't argue. Neither did the crew. Everyone who survived understood. Some truths don't need to be told. They just need to be locked away, where curiosity can't reach them. The fleet returned to Earth 3 weeks later. They were met with parades, applause, marching bands, and holograms in every city. But they didn't celebrate. Not one ship fired a flare. Not one soldier smiled in uniform. They walked down streets like ghosts. The people of Earth clapped and waved and shouted slogans, but they didn't see the hollow eyes behind the armor. They didn't see the nightmares lingering behind every blink. They didn't understand what had really happened out there. They thought humanity had won, but humanity had simply survived something they didn't know existed. And next time, if someone ever crossed the line again, if another eidolon ever burned, if the law was broken once more, the buried star would return. And this time, it might not stop at one species. This time, everyone would pay. The parades ended after a month. The banners faded. The media moved on. But the silence lingered. Commander Rorland had retired quietly, refusing all medals, interviews, and legacy programs. The rest of the fleet followed suit, scattering across Earth and the colonies like shattered glass, too polite to speak of what they'd seen and too traumatized to forget. But something was happening beneath the calm. Something small, unnoticed. At first, it began with whispers on the underground net, a file, one not listed on any official battle logs, buried metadata with fragments of footage from Hive Singularity Prime. Not of the war, not of the blood, but of the rift, of something coming through. The footage was grainy, corrupted, fragmented, but the shape was unmistakable. The eyes, the wings, the pulse, the buried star. It was only 5 seconds of video, and it spread like fire. Most dismissed it as a hoax, deepfake tech, war propaganda from ex-fleet radicals. Others weren't so sure, and a few got obsessed. In a darkened research lab outside Reno, a man named Draven Core sat alone at his desk, frame lit by the soft blue glow of his monitors. He wasn't military, wasn't political, Wasn't even old enough to remember the Scour Wars. Just a civilian cryptographer with clearance that used to matter. Now he was a ghost in a government think tank the public didn't know existed. And he had seen the footage, watched it 53 times, not because of the creature, but because of the metadata behind the frame, GPS triangulation, time distortion readings, and a string of characters embedded in the 4th second that no one else had noticed. This is not the first. He leaned back, breathing hard. Not the first what? His search had begun with mild curiosity, but over the weeks it grew teeth. He accessed retired fleet logs, dug into blacklisted data cores, traced routing protocols from old council servers. What he found didn't make sense. In the last 70 years, there had been 4 other unexplained disappearances of entire civilizations across the outer reaches of known space. Each one officially labeled as internal collapse or environmental failure. But all 4 systems had been monitored by Akari patrols, and each had gone silent overnight. Draven didn't believe in coincidence. He opened a new file and typed 3 words in bold at the top. They summoned it. Then, before he could save the file, the lights in his lab dimmed. The screens shut off. The power dropped. For a second, he thought it was a breaker. Then the emergency lighting kicked in, glowing red across the walls, and the door locked. He stood slowly, heart pounding. "System override," he said. "Administrator core, theta-level clearance, unlock." The door did not budge. Instead, a small panel slid open beside the wall and revealed a camera. It was active, recording him. "Hello?" he called. "This is a secure facility. Who the hell is watching?" Silence. Then, from the intercom, a voice he didn't recognize. "Stop looking." He froze. "I don't know who you think." "Stop digging," the voice repeated. "You're asking questions that should never be answered." Draven's mouth went dry. "You're with naval intelligence?" The voice said nothing, but the implication was clear. This wasn't some external breach, this was internal. Someone inside the Terran infrastructure had been monitoring all inquiries about Hive Singularity Prime. Someone wanted the truth buried. He backed away slowly from the desk, hands raised. "I haven't shared anything," he lied. "You will," the voice said, "because you're curious, because that's how your kind works. You stare into the abyss and beg for it to stare back." Draven's breathing quickened. "This is suppression of truth." "No," the voice cut in coldly. "This is containment, because if the wrong person learns the right thing, it wakes up." The lights returned. The door clicked open. The voice was gone. But Draven knew 2 things with absolute certainty. 1. The buried star had not been the Akari's first offense. 2. Someone in Terran command had known it all along. A week later, on Earth, Gren stood beside Rorland in a quiet coastal town, watching the ocean crash against the rocks. The air smelled like salt and old regret. "You hear about the data leak?" Gren asked. Rorland nodded once. "Draven Core, ex-contractor. Intel shows he tried to pull core logs from the Eidolon files." "You think he saw it?" Rorland didn't answer. Gren stared at him. "If this gets out—" "It won't," Rorland cut him off. "He's being watched. Closely. We should have purged everything." "We did." Gren hesitated. "Then how—" Rorland looked at the water. "There's always someone who sees what they're not supposed to." Gren frowned. "So what now? Silence him? Burn his lab? Or do we admit the truth?" "What truth?" Rorland said quietly. "That we used the silencer protocol, and something else used it better." Rorland turned. "There is no truth. Not anymore. There's only what people can handle." Gren stepped closer. And what if one day someone doesn't care what they're allowed to handle? What if they go digging anyway? Rorland didn't blink. Then they'll find it. And maybe they'll understand why it was buried. Gren looked down, then nodded once. That night, a small shuttle left Earth, destination unlisted. Its pilot, Draven Core. Inside he carried encrypted files, raw sensor data, and one name that kept showing up in old classified logs, the Buried Star. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to know more. Because something about the voice in that lab stuck with him. If the wrong person learns the right thing, it wakes up. And Draven wasn't sure anymore whether he was the wrong person, or the only one who could understand what came next. Draven's shuttle cut through deep space like a whisper through silence. It was a retrofit scout vessel, barely big enough for one man and a month's worth of supplies. The ship had no name, no registry tags, no broadcasting beacon. Just a matte black hull and encrypted flight path coded to zigzag through dead systems and forgotten war zones. He didn't need speed. He needed shadows. And answers. The Terran Council had never authorized this journey. Naval intelligence certainly hadn't. The moment he launched from Earth's orbital rings, Draven became a ghost. And that was exactly how he wanted it. He didn't trust Earth anymore. Not the people. Not the government. Not even his own former colleagues. Because somewhere in the walls of power, someone had known about the buried star long before Eidolon ever burned. And he intended to find out how far back it went. The ship's AI, old, stripped of all modern neural links, chimed softly as he approached the outer rim of the Vasker expanse. This region of space had once hosted a thriving mining colony. Until one day, 72 years ago, it went dark. No distress call, no warning, just silence. Official records blamed radiation from a rogue pulsar that destabilized the colony's shielding system. The file was sealed, buried. But Draven had found a raw data fragment from a broken probe, and it had a signature, the same quantum echo as the buried star's arrival at Hive Singularity Prime. If he was right, Vasker didn't die from a pulsar. It died because someone broke the law. The law no species had written, but every intelligent race was expected to obey. You do not touch the innocent. And someone had. Again. The mining outpost came into view on day 9 of the voyage. It was floating debris now. Split metal, fractured hulls, entire cargo bays spiraling through space like leaves in the wind. Draven slowed the shuttle to a crawl, heart pounding. The place had been large. Big enough to house 10,000 workers, families, children, and now it looked like a war zone, except there were no blast marks, no wreckage from enemy ships, no signs of traditional battle, just implosion, as if gravity had turned inward and crushed the whole station from the inside out. He docked at a broken airlock, sealing his helmet tight and stepping into the void. The interior of the ruined station was dark, cold, and eerily clean. No bodies, no blood, just empty rooms and walls scratched with symbols he couldn't recognize. Not Akari, not Terran, something older. He moved through the corridors in silence, flashlight trembling in his grip. Room after room was filled with personal belongings, hollow pictures, children's toys, unused rations. Whoever or whatever came here didn't loot. It didn't need to. In the central core of the station, he found the data vault, shattered, half melted from heat that hadn't come from any known weapon. But part of it still functioned. He pulled a portable core decryptor from his pack and connected it to the main port. The screen flickered, then played back a video log. A woman appeared, mid-30s, Terran engineer badge on her chest, her voice shaking as the lights behind her flickered. They told us to shut down the dig site, said we'd gone too deep. But we didn't even hit the bedrock yet. All we found was a room. Not even natural. Something carved. Old. Dead. But she glanced over her shoulder. We broke through anyway. Had to. Orders from HQ. A tremor rocked the camera. She flinched. After that, people started hearing things, feeling things. I woke up crying. Not from nightmares. From memories I didn't have. Things dying. Worlds burning. And then the screen blurred. Static swallowed the rest of the footage. Draven sat frozen. They had found something buried below the colony. A structure. Ancient. Dormant. And by disturbing it, they had broken the law. He disconnected the decryptor, sealing the data into a personal core. His breath came fast inside the helmet. The buried star hadn't just been summoned by the Akari. It had been summoned before. Multiple times. Every time the innocent were destroyed for gain, the gods of old, or whatever they were, took notice. But why hadn't humanity known? Why had there been no warning in Terran history? No message, no religion, no myth? He turned to leave, and saw a figure standing in the hallway. Tall, unmoving. Wrong. He froze. The figure wore no suit, no face, just a silhouette, humming with static around the edges like a broken signal trying to imitate shape. Then it spoke. No mouth moved, no sound came, but he heard it. You stare again? Curious as always. Draven backed up, heart hammering. Who are you? The figure stepped closer. Its feet didn't touch the ground. Not your enemy, not your friend. Then what? It tilted its head. Witness. Draven clenched his fists. What am I witnessing? The lights above them dimmed. The station groaned. The shadow's body flickered, momentarily showing a glimpse of stars where its form had been, as if it were made of the sky itself. Then it said, the law was broken here. You seek the cause. He nodded. Yes. You think it's a warning? He hesitated. Isn't it? The figure came closer. The room got colder. You are Terran. You think in wars, in victories, in punishment. But this is not war. This is restoration. The balance must hold. Draven swallowed. Why now? Why Eidolon? Why us? The figure paused, then said something that chilled him deeper than any vacuum of space. Because you were supposed to be different. Draven's breath caught in his chest. You showed mercy when others did not, built peace where others burned. For a time, we watched and wondered. But now, you have learned the taste of easy revenge, of righteous extinction, and the buried star stirs more quickly when hearts darken. Draven stepped back. We didn't bring it. The Akari did. You built the weapon, the figure said. You taught it pain. Draven's head spun. The silencer protocol. They had created a psychological weapon to unmake a hive mind. And now, it had been mirrored, refined, reused. They had given the buried star a new voice, and it had used it to silence an empire. You think this will stop, the figure said, but it does not sleep anymore. It remembers what you taught it. It knows your signal. And it knows you will break the law again. Draven's knees felt weak. We can stop it. We can keep the law. The figure came inches from his visor. There is only one way to keep the law. Draven whispered, What? Don't build things worth burning. Then the figure vanished. No flash, no sound, just gone. And somewhere in the station's broken systems, an ancient voice, not human, not machine, whispered in a language older than biology. Judgment waits? Draven returned to his shuttle trembling. He didn't speak for hours. He barely breathed. When he finally transmitted the recovered data into his core vault, he added one new entry. Labeled in all caps, Sentience may be a mistake. The universe wasn't empty. It was just waiting, watching, And it had rules, not moral ones, not political, just one, written into the bones of ancient stars. Don't break the balance. Don't destroy the innocent for gain. Don't weaponize pain. Don't invite what cannot be uninvited. And if you do, it comes. And it remembers. The shuttle breached Earth's orbit on a cold, gray morning. No escort. No welcome. Just a silent descent into Terran airspace, with forged clearance codes and a ship blackened by radiation storms. By the time Draven touched down on the outskirts of Perimeter City, his eyes hadn't closed in 3 days. He hadn't slept since the shadow spoke to him in the dead station. You were supposed to be different. The words wouldn't leave his mind. They looped endlessly, louder than the ship's engines, sharper than the silence that met him at landing. He stepped off the ramp with the data core clutched to his chest and walked into a world that still didn't know what it had survived. Perimeter City looked like peace. Clean streets, towering skylines, children playing under artificial suns. But it was a lie built on ignorance. They cheered their soldiers. They buried their heroes. And in every broadcast, the government called it the justified war. Not a single word about the buried star. Not a mention of Hive Singularity's true death. Not a whisper about the thing in the rift. That was about to change. Or so Draven thought. He moved through the city unnoticed. Facial modifiers on. Neural signature scrambled. He wasn't ready to be seen. Not yet. He needed to get to someone who would understand. Someone who would listen. There was only one man he could think of. Commander Rorland. The ghost who'd led the fleet to vengeance and watched something else finish the job. Rorland hadn't answered messages in over a year. He lived alone now in a coastal town outside what was left of old California, in a home with no cameras and no neighbors. He grew vegetables, sat by the water, spoke to no one. But when Draven knocked on his door, the old man opened it after just one knock. He looked older, tired, not broken, emptied. "You found it," Rorland said before Draven could speak. Draven nodded. "Come in," the commander said. The house was simple: books, outdated tech, a fireplace that hadn't been used in months. Draven placed the data core on the table and sat across from the man whose orders had nearly erased a civilization. "I went to Vasker," Draven said. Rorland raised an eyebrow. "That's not just curiosity, that's suicide. I had to know. I had to see if Hive Singularity was a one-time event. It wasn't." Rorland poured 2 glasses of dark liquor, set one down, untouched. "No," he said, voice hollow. "It wasn't." "They summoned it," Draven continued. "Every species that broke the law, every time they targeted the weak, the thing woke up. It's not a god. It's not even alive in the way we understand. But it's watching. Always." Rorland took a sip. "And now you're here to tell the world?" Draven stared at him. "Shouldn't they know?" Rorland didn't answer. Instead, he stood and pulled a small metal box from a drawer. Inside was a single device, a beacon. "This," he said, placing it on the table, "is a pulse recorder. Fleet issue. It captured the full energy signature from the buried star's descent. I've kept it hidden." Draven leaned forward. "You knew it would come again." "No," Rorland said. "I knew we'd call it again." They sat in silence. The wind outside howled against the glass. Draven spoke carefully. "There has to be a way to stop it." "There is," Rorland said. "Don't give it a reason." "And if someone does?" Rorland's eyes locked on his. "Then it comes." Later that night, Draven stood alone by the shore. His hands trembled as he turned the data core over in his grip. The final copy of everything he had found. Sensor data, testimonies, footage of Hive Singularity, footage of Vasker, the encounter with the figure in the dead station, the warning carved into a collapsing civilization. He could upload it to the black net, let the whole of Earth see, blow the doors off every government cover-up, expose what the Terran High Council tried to bury. But he didn't. Because deep down, he heard the voice again. Don't build things worth burning. And he realized, if he released this truth, it wouldn't bring justice. It would bring fear, and fear, when it metastasizes, becomes preemptive war. Humanity would panic, militarize, lash out. Nations would strike first just in case. Governments would race to build weapons. Outposts would be fortified, and somewhere someone would break the law again. Not because they were evil, because they were scared. And the buried star would wake, not as a whisper, as a cleansing fire. He sat down in the sand, looked up at the stars, and wept. Not from weakness, but from understanding. Some truths aren't secrets, they're weapons. And when you carry a weapon powerful enough to judge the galaxy itself, the first responsibility is not how you use it, it's whether you should. Draven left Rorland's the next morning. He didn't speak another word. He took the data core and dropped it in the ocean before leaving town. No backups, no copies. Just silence. But somewhere in the black of space, beyond the reach of human technology, a presence stirred, not awakened, just aware. It had no form, no planet, no voice, just a memory of fire, of screams, of pain, and of the one species that had stared back at it not with reverence, but with recognition. And somewhere in the deep, a rift blinked open for half a second, then closed. No warning. No message, just a reminder. The stars keep score, and humanity's balance sheet was no longer blank.